Remote interpreting is something that many of us have found ourselves thrust into over the last few months, and there is a learning curve that we are all having to adjust to. Luckily, there is a lot of information out there about the tools and techniques that can help us navigate this new world. A lot of our colleagues have put out some great information about the types of equipment to use, the type of camera, microphones, and headsets that are ideal for remote interpreting. IEEC and other organizations have developed guidelines and standards for remote interpretation. And each of the different platforms that are being used for remote interpretation have great manuals and guides. But once you have all of that, the right equipment, the right platform, that's the minimum that you need to provide good interpretation remotely. Now, what are a few things that you can do as an interpreter to help you improve your virtual presence so that you look as professional as you normally do when you are actually in person? So these are a few tips from an interpreter and actor that can help you provide better remote interpretation. Number 1, the frame. What's in the frame? What do we mean by that? Well, the frame is simply what your audience is going to see on their screens. If the camera picks it up, it's going to be in the frame, and your audience will look at it. So, you'll want to consider first your background. You want the clients to focus on you and not whatever you have going on behind you. I purchased some inexpensive photo paper called seamless paper to put up behind me. It makes it nice and simple. I used a backdrop stand, as you can see right there, to hold it up. Of course, you can use anything you'd like. As long as it's not in the frame, the audience can't see it. Now, if you don't have the background such as this, there are other things you can do. YouTube is full of great tips for how to create a backdrop with household items. I would just caution you to be careful. If you are going to use something like a bed sheet, make sure it's well ironed and that it's lit well, because it can look pretty bad. And it's better to have nothing than something that looks cheap. If you don't want to put a background up, at least make sure that what's behind you is free of clutter and organized. That way, the clients, again, will focus on you and not what you have behind you. I'm sure that you're not working in a professional studio in a soundproof room, and you don't have to be. But an important thing is to make sure you control as best you can all the background noises. For example, if you know that at 7:30 every Saturday morning the garbage truck comes by, or at 8 o'clock the dogs need to be fed, maybe that's not the time that you need to set aside for doing remote interpreting, because it can be distracting. It can be distracting for you, and if your microphone picks it up, it can be distracting for your audience. In addition to noise, you want to be able to control other possible outside interruptions. For example, I'm sure a few years ago you all saw this video of Professor Robert Kelly being interviewed by the BBC. He was going to talk about the impeachment of South Korean president, and he's interrupted by his children. Minimize your movements. When I'm teaching live, I tend to walk around the room and pace. I talk a lot with my hands. I try to show emotion, and I'm constantly just moving around trying to engage my audience. Now, if I'm trying to do that when I'm talking to you on the computer, it looks really weird. The camera exaggerates all of the movements. So when I'm interpreting or doing an online session, I need to make sure that I control my movements and gesticulate less. All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. The close-up. One of the major differences between working remotely and working in an in-person session is that usually the participants aren't 6 inches away from your face. Depending on the settings that the audience has, when you speak, your face may fill up the 42-inch screen they have on their desks. Now, as I said before, the camera picks up and exaggerates everything. So when that speaker is going back into that boring rant for the 15th time, everybody just saw your eye roll. When you're struggling to come up with the right word, well, all of that is going to be broadcast. So when you are working in person in a location, there's a lot more going on. Attention is divided. The participants are looking at each other, looking at the walls, looking at the clocks. But when they are looking at a screen, whatever's on the screen is what's going to grab their attention. So keep your gestures small. Try to ground yourself. And if you really can't avoid making faces, just turn the camera off for a second or step out of the frame. These are just a few tips to keep in mind to help you get to the next level in your remote interpretation. Now, if this is an urgent last-minute assignment and clients say, hey, we need you to do this now, they'll be much more forgiving if there is some external noise or if your background isn't as nice and neat as you would like it. All that is fine. However, if you are marketing and promoting your services to offer professional remote interpreting, you'll want to be sure to apply some of these tips to make sure you look as professional as you sound.